I don't think I have to really state how big a game changer the 90s were for American animation, especially on the television side. After the merchandise-driven landscape of the 80s started to fade away with only a handful of heavy hitters carrying on, and after smash hits like DuckTales and Tiny Toon Adventures helped boom the syndication market, many fresh new artists got a chance of a lifetime to spread their wings and bring some much-needed creative freedom back into the industry. Disney Channel was launching their Disney Afternoon block, premiering at least one new 65-episode series every year, and Nickelodeon launched their Nicktoons lineup, where each entry in the initial trilogy was about as distinct and unique as you could possibly get. And then there's Hanna-Barbera. They were chugging along just fine in the 80s thanks to the success of the Smurfs and a bunch of spin-offs based off their past successes, but any more ambitious attempts like the Pirates of Darkwater struggled to take off. However, come 1991, the studio ended up being bought by Turner Broadcasting, who already owned MGM's entire library, and Fred Siebert, fresh off of MTV, was put in charge of the studio. And he had a clear vision that would change everything. The Cartoon Network was thought up, marketed using the vast catalog at their disposal, and would debut the following year as a convenient means of keeping Warner Bros., MGM's, and HB's animated legacies alive. But original programming wouldn't be on the schedule for a couple years. This is where the show Two Stupid Dogs comes in, being one of the first new HB shows under Siebert. It wasn't actually greenlit under him, it was originally pitched literally 2 days before the buyout happened, and then got delayed afterward, but nevertheless, it would very much set the tone for what Siebert's version of the company would become. This didn't debut on Cartoon Network, instead airing during HB's trademark syndication block, as well as the Turner-owned TBS. But as you can probably already see, it bears a huge resemblance to what they would soon after make for Cartoon Network. And to give you the answer why, let's look at some of the people who were creatively involved in making this series. You obviously had creator Donovan Cook, but there's several other names you may recognize here, like Craig McCracken, Paul Ruddish, Rob Renzetti, David Weiss, Andrew Stanton, Gennady Tartakovsky. Holy crap, that's a lot of talent! And not only that, but the vast majority of them started their professional careers from this show. So yeah, this show that's often pushed to the side in discussion was very much a direct predecessor to the Cartoons line. It may have even been how Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, and Cow and Chicken came to be in the first place. Crazy to think about, huh? So what exactly was Two Stupid Dogs all about, those not in the know may ask? Well, first I gotta talk about the overall structure. The first season consists of 13 sets of episodes, each containing 2 stories about the titular Pooches, and one of a pseudo-revival of a classic in Secret Secret Squirrel. The former were all directed by series creator Donovan Cook, with designs and art direction from Craig McCracken, while the latter was headed by Chalk Zone co-creator Larry Huber, with designs from Paul Ruddish, who, in case you didn't know, famously redefined Mickey Mouse 20 years later. I'm going to cover this sub-series separately from the main one, so let's start with covering the namesake. So, a typical cartoon has this pair of unnamed dogs. One small, hyper and talkative, and the other big and soft-spoken.
We're a contestant! We're a contestant!
What's a contestant?
I don't know.
Trying to get food or just kinda doing whatever catches their fancy. However, as they accidentally get themselves into escalating situations, they prove slow to comprehend anything, if they even do so at all. They're very impressionable and always seem willing to trust whatever their first instinct or sign says, no questions asked. They are very, as the title suggests, stupid.
Huh? Turn them in! You gotta get $10,000. What? Yes, turn them in. You must have $10,000.
You'd think this stick would get tired quickly, but it's surprising how much humor they're able to get simply out of the world around them. While most of the plots more or less boil down to the dogs being blind to their surroundings, they can get surprisingly varied. A lot of the time, they're just overcomplicating what sounds like the simplest of goals because they can't put 2 and 2 together. like going through a psychology session, pyramid scheme, and a presumed bank heist, all for a goddamn quarter. Or the big dog getting his head stuck in a fence hole, and little dog thinking he's doomed to forever spend life away from his companion.
It's better that way. For both of us. For all of us.
All of who?
Heck, one time they get launched in freaking outer space, and all they care about is what they can eat.
Cheese! Go that way!
Sometimes there's another character added on to mix things up a bit. Every so often, they get in on a job or scheme run by the show's signature redneck everyman, Mr. Hollywood. Mostly remembered for his catchphrase. Say it with me now. Ain't that cute? But it's wrong! He keeps pushing them around and likes to take advantage of them however he can, only for karma to bite him in the rear. Not the most enjoyable foil in my opinion. He can honestly get tired in large doses.
Union break!
But it's a classic dynamic that works all the same. There's also a few episodes about this nervous kid named Kenny, who goes to school and just kinda takes the dogs with him. He doesn't own them, he just needed something for show and tell one day, and I guess their companionship just kinda stuck after, I don't know. Honestly, in these the dogs just kinda play side support to what the kid is up to, and in one case they practically don't even appear. But Kenny himself is so vulnerable yet still competent enough of a student where you genuinely feel sympathy and want things to turn out well for him. The one where he tries to get with a girl sounds like the most cliche 90s thing ever, but goddamn, they genuinely make it cute. I'm a bit of a softie, okay?
She talked to me! She talked to me! I can't believe we actually touched!
Plus, the school principal is freaking Gary Owens. Who wouldn't love having him as your principal?
There's that wonderful pea thing you do so well. Your parents must be very proud.
But then, occasionally they try something a little conceptually different. There's one particularly memorable episode where they come across a parody of the Brady Bunch having a barbecue that they want in on, and they of course wreak havoc all across the house. But the family never gives a single crap about how much damage the dogs cause and how much they get hurt themselves, so long as they can shoehorn in some bullshit moral.
What did we learn this time, kids?
I learned that you can make many new friends in the hospital.
It's the kind of entertainment where you just ask afterward what the hell you just watched, but still find yourself laughing your rear off.
Hey! I didn't learn a darn thing.
But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Red Trilogy. 3 separate cartoons that start the exact same way, literally verbatim.
Where's the food?
Food? I don't know. We're in nature. I guess we'll eat nature stuff.
And they encounter this version of Little Red Riding Hood that was clearly shaken as a baby.
Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. Tra-la-la.
So the dogs went in on the goodies he's bringing to Granny's house. But because Red's a dumbass, they get lost. The first, they end up at the 3 Bears, and they get beheaded. The second, they find the Hansel and Gretel witch, get fattened up, and they get eaten. The third, the wolf finally loses patience and drags them to Granny's himself. And the rest has everyone just kind of bumbling around and not getting anything accomplished.
What a big belly button you have, Granny!
Despite how similar these all are, they all prove highly entertaining and you don't feel quite disappointed you're seeing basically the same stick again. The tone of these are also easily the most Ren and Stimpy the show ever got. And that's because John K. himself was partially responsible for these. Yep, just after he got fired from his own show, he reportedly stopped in to help doctor these storyboards for the team. Even a few of his colleagues got in on this, like Richard Purcell and Bob Jake. So yeah, that only makes this little experiment even more interesting, if rather uncomfortable in hindsight. But we'll get back to those comparisons later on. The humor is about what you'd expect from an early 90s cartoon of this style. Like Dexter and Powerpuff, it could feel a little slow and meandering sometimes, but each joke told through the dialogue and visuals are still able to land with consistent competence. Admittedly, I usually just kinda think, yeah, that's a good one, instead of actively laughing at it, but there are some real knee slappers here and there.
Wow! You got in free! I gotta get in free too! Just do what I did.
Obviously, a lot of the humor is built off the semi-absurdist environment, and just how much of a sucker these two losers can get. But it's a formula that ends up working well here.
How about 100 trips through the super cheap economy style 1-pound hot dog buffet?
And a limo.
What's a limo?
Stick with me. I'm on a roll.
Of course, you have your handful of more adult jokes too, some of which I am still shocked they got away with.
Know how you can tell they're boy dogs? Ooh.
More gross out than I was expecting as well, and certainly an uncomfortable amount of vor, but it's drawn with enough simplicity and played casually enough respectively that it's not quite as graphic as Ren and Stimpy could get. And there's other recurring bits worth getting a kick out of, like how they find a way to somehow work corn into each cartoon. Sometimes it's a main plot point, other times it's a picture in the background or something equally subtle. It's not something I exactly understand nor really laugh at, but it's certainly a fun thing to catch on to and point out. Then you have the art, which at first doesn't seem like much, especially if you were to look at stills. Those geometric designs and rather simplistic backgrounds, again brought to us by McCracken, seem appealing to the eye, but don't look like they give the eye much to look at. But then you catch on to how well bordered many of the shots look, and how fluidly the characters move when put to animation. It's very much the familiar Hanna-Barbera style to a T, but with a lot more of a budget. This is how you make an old style new again.
Okay, we want to look good so we can get the free dog food.
Not every episode is a banger, sure, but it's surprisingly fun just to watch what these puny minds will get themselves into next. It's not really trying much beyond character-driven and sometimes satirical humor, but it ends up faring well on both these fronts, and thus proves to be an entertaining experience regardless. But that's only half of what the show has to offer.
They're stupid dogs!
And in the middle of each 22-minute package is a revival of the 1965 HB series Secret Squirrel. Except now, he's Super Secret Secret Squirrel. Okay? So, no surprise, this series stars a secret agent who is a squirrel, whose job it is to foil whatever dastardly, if silly plan, is currently ravaging his city. And like many secret agents, has all these nifty, off-the-wall gadgets to aid him. In this version, he's voiced by Jess Harnell. He balances the suaveness and smartassery of the character just about perfectly, and gives the role such a distinct zing that only Jess could bring.
Looks like our little Kenny Crooks are on their way. Let's cock-a-doodle-don't and say we did. I'm afraid I'll have to place you under protective custody for endangering an endangered species.
Who I actually think I prefer over Mel Blanc's original version.
Better turn around and get back to headquarters, Morocco. Sounds like trouble.
And like the original, he is joined by Morocco Mole, voiced by Jim Cummings channeling Peter Lorre.
Now that's not the super secret agent I know talking. You never give up, secret.
He's basically that sidekick archetype who is always very supportive of our hero, but is completely useless in doing anything on his own. And the show is very self-aware of this. Not even joking, in one episode he is tasked with holding an ancient egg for 3 seconds, and the entire story is just him constantly losing grip of the damn thing. Even on the rare occasion he does something kinda clever, he still manages to screw it up in the end somehow.
Quick thinking, Morocco!
Don't mention it!
So yeah, he is basically a total joke. But despite that, I still find him kinda likable. Not just because of the vocal performance and optimism, but because much of what he does is so ridiculous, you just kinda find yourself guessing what he's going to do next.
Why ever did you do that?
So the egg wouldn't bump into the door and get all smashed.
Other characters include the Tony J voiced chief who gives the two their missions,
Have you ever considered getting into undercover work?
Penny, who occasionally provides further support to the agents but mostly sits on the side,
Well, at least it'll give me a chance to freshen up.
and of course, all the different villains that, although mostly don't leave much of an impression as characters, certainly have memorable schemes, like blocking out the sun with this hand satellite thing, or stealing all the world's gold. There's also this Queen Bee I'll never forget, specifically because he tries to mind control Secret into falling in love with her, and it's treated like a drug.
Can't love, must hate, save Penny.
Let me tell you, the implications here make me super uncomfortable.
Marry me and be my prince.
From what I know, this series only very loosely carries over from the original show. The differences in the designs should speak for themselves, but it still feels like it was made with a love and respect for it. And sure enough, Donovan Cook himself said that's how this sub-series came to be in the first place. They go full out with the aesthetic too. I mean, look at those James Bond style title cards and that atmospheric background music. Really sets the mood for what you're about to watch. Despite the more serious tone though, the situations and conflicts are often a lot more cartoony and ridiculous compared to even the dog segments. There's a segment where Secret, Morocco, and Chief all swap body parts and naturally struggle in functioning.
I'll just use one of my super secret bad guy getting gizmos. Wrong jack.
Another where everyone gets voodooed and the guy is able to control Secret because of a bit of a tail he got from his official fan club.
From now on, we only give out membership cards.
And that aforementioned Queen Bee episode I think speaks for itself. Of course, it isn't afraid to get very referential every now and then as well.
Look over there! It's Fred Flintstone!
Where?
They were definitely as committed as possible to making this feel like its own thing, rather than merely an extension to the parent series. Something I feel even most of the later sub-series on Cartoon Network would struggle with. This really felt like two different shows within one 22-minute package, not unlike how much of Hanna-Barbera's 60s Saturday morning lineup was formatted. And I commend them for going through the trouble of making that work, on top of just making a damn entertaining secret agent show on its own. Secret and Morocco definitely deserved more than just 13 adventures. Unfortunately, it was already pretty apparent by the time Season 2 came along that this show just didn't have a lot of staying power. Super Secret Secret Squirrel was ditched.
Good show, Secret. You're fired.
Supposedly there were plans to reboot other HB classics, but I couldn't find a verified source on this, so who really knows? And on top of that, while there were 13 new sets of episodes, only one cartoon in each of these sets were actually new. Literally 2/3 of the season were reruns. Isn't that sad? But going into the new segments themselves, while Donovan solely directed the dogs in Season 1, more people got to sit in the chair this time around, which is nice to see. In addition, the art direction is now managed by Todd Fredrickson and Miles Thompson, who you'd be far less likely to recognize compared to someone like Craig McCracken, but rest assured, they would also go on to have lengthy careers that are still going on to this day. It's a real shame they don't get recognized more. And that is only where the differences start. Take a look at the stories and writing, for instance. Most of their Season 1 cartoons could classify as bottle episodes of sorts, with how they often take place in a single location, and how little the plot actually moves, because they both barely have any brain cells. In Season 2, they are on the move considerably more often. It's definitely tighter paced overall, with less dead air, which I'm sure some people would prefer, but I personally don't think it works too well for a show built off slow-wittedness.
You done thinking yet?
Frankly, I'm stumped.
The dynamic between these dogs has also changed a bit. To be clear, a lot of the time they still stumble into these situations as a result of simple-minded instinct like before. See episodes like Inside Out, where they unknowingly get carried into a museum alongside a bone they want and try to get indoors.
Wait, it says exit. We don't want to go out, we want to go in.
Or Las Pelotas, where they enter a tennis court to mess around with the balls and equipment.
Hey, look, balls!
And also that time they break into houses to obtain Girl Scout cookies.
Stupid hammer!
These are all classic setups, about in line with what you'd expect from them by now. But then you have other episodes where they turn Little Dog into the really impulsive, emotionally unstable one, which I guess he always kinda was, like that time they fought over a toilet seat.
I want the 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 toilet seat.
But there, it felt more like him having a one-track mind than out of any real attitude. But in Season 2, you have examples like Jerk, where he gets visibly upset over Big Dog missing a word in the word puzzle. And Bathroom Humor, where he gets very serious about how they go about taking a pee.
Hey, it's not my fault you gotta go at 3 in the morning. What am I, your mother's keeper?
Meanwhile, Big Dog, while he still clearly lacks a grasp on reality for the most part, seems to have considerably more common sense than before, and can sometimes even outright oppose what's going on.
I don't like this fun.
What? You think you can do better? What do you do for fun?
I eat.
Put simply, when I think of him falling in love with a hamster at a pet store, this is not exactly how I'd expect him to react.
It has, it has! Why do you think we're in here, you fool?
I suppose all this does allow for a better variety and conflict, and these cartoons can still be enjoyed fine on their own, but I feel like these deviations kinda take away from the initial charm of the show, at least in my opinion. Even the animation is definitely not the same as before. Beyond the greater increase of backdrops per episode, they get a lot more flexible with the dog's designs and there's a more pose-heavy approach overall. Little Dog in particular can get very expressive, depending on the storyboard artist, which was admittedly a bit of an acquired taste, but it grew on me over time and brought to mind the kind of stuff we'd see in Dexter's lab. And it's certainly not as jarring as Big Dog showing his eyes much more often. Ugh. There's a couple more meta stories in there too, like one where they're at this cartoon boot camp and the strict sergeant keeps pushing them around through all these cliches, and it's about as intentionally cheesy as you'd imagine.
Begin beating! I'm waiting, ladies!
And the last aired episode presents itself as a 30s throwback, with that constant ragtime piano, the dialogue cards, random sentient objects, exclamations physically existing within their world. It's a very fun one, and just the experimentation of it all. And one instance where the looser animation works to their advantage. So I suppose it more or less evens out in the end. And you can say it went out on a memorable enough note. It's not ceremonious in any way, but this really was just a dumb 7-minute cartoon, so might as well make this return to form come full circle, right? So yeah, it's definitely disappointing that just when the series seemed like it was gaining steam, it not only got a much shorter order, but what we got was, in my opinion at least, a bit of a downgrade. Again, it wasn't bad by any means, and getting to see more individual visions was a good plus. But there was a certain charm to the original template that the changes here mostly seem to take away from. All in all, I'd say Season 2 more or less proved that these talents had a lot of potential that they just really wanted to get out, so it was probably for the best that the series left it here, and were subsequently allowed to pursue their own ideas. This was, even more so than Season 1, a forerunner for what was soon to come for Hanna-Barbera and Cartoon Network.
Take a vacation from yourself.
It's funny, whenever people look back at Two Stupid Dogs, they probably remember it as a fun, casual watch, but don't really think twice about it. However, the show was much more than that. In terms of entertainment value, sure, their later works that would serve as Cartoon Network's first originals kinda ate its dinner, but it proved that there was a lot of creative juice yet to be unleashed within Turner's walls. It proved that an old, relatively forgotten property from the 60s can be modernized in a loving, fresh way. And above all else, it proved that some of the many different names within the credits could be the next big talent. Unfortunately, Warner Media has not been very nice to this part of their history over the years. It did eventually manage to see the light of day on DVD, albeit only the first season, even though it would have been easy to just fit in the segments newly made for season 2 to make it complete, and it's certainly not enough to warrant a release on its own despite this being labeled as a Volume 1, but I digress. And that's about the only way you can really watch this show. Unless you have a VPN, in which case it just released as I was editing on HBO Max in Latin America, but as of now, not the States for Zaslav knows what reason. Sure, at a glance you could easily accuse this of being derivative of Ren and Stimpy, something Ted Turner would funnily enough agree with.
No to disease!
But if you pay enough attention to what went into the show, you'll find that will do it a major disservice. It was a charming throwback to what seemed like a bygone era of the company, and would pave the way for a much bigger renaissance further down the road.
Actually, we wanted some pie.
Where's the pie?
And for that alone, you have to at least appreciate its existence. And if you've watched this entire video and still think it isn't worth remembering, well, ain't that cute. But it's wrong.